Greetings and welcome to ROI Clear. My name is Ray Hightower, and today we are fortunate to have as our guest Mr. Jeff Cohen. Jeff Cohen is a software developer, educator, business owner, adjunct professor at two nationally known, I would even say globally known universities. I've known this man for over 10 years, maybe longer. You know, time flies when you're having fun, so it's hard to count the years. So ROI Clear audience, please join me in welcoming Jeff Cohen. Jeff, welcome.
What's up, everybody? Nice to be here.
Glad to have you here.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad to have you. You know, we've had a lot of real estate entrepreneurs on here, and we've had people in other business areas, car wash owners, marketing people in different areas. I also like to make sure we include some technology people. You're in the software field, and many of our listeners know that I used to own a software company. So you and I connected back in the development community, the technology community in Chicago many years ago. So glad to have you here, and glad to put you in a position where you can deliver some value for our audience. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So to kick things off, why don't we start off with an elevator pitch? For those who are new to ROI Clear, Jeff Cohen is on an elevator with someone he wants to influence. And Jeff, what would you say to that person in the course of an elevator ride?
I would say that, you know, what I'm doing right now is I build apps for clinical researchers in the behavioral sciences at academic institutions. So people who are in that area understand that, but for the rest of us, the behavioral sciences is all about helping people get better health outcomes through behavior change rather than drugs. So drugs are good, but
yes,
behavior change is good too. And so whether it's looking at health outcomes with obesity or cancer, variety of mental health concerns, the behavioral sciences is key to solving a lot of those kind of endemic chronic problems. So we provide the software for researchers to be able to gather good data, do good experiments, and push the frontier of that science forward.
Fascinating. And what's really fascinating is I've always known you as a software developer, but in the few years since I've left Chicago, you've decided to, I didn't want to just focus everything on when I left Chicago. The time does not revolve around when I moved to another city. So, but it's the way I think of it. But in the past several years, you have decided to focus your attention in a particular vertical market, and that is the behavioral sciences. What is it that prompted you to focus on that niche? What is it that attracted you to that? Or how did you happen to choose that vertical as opposed to automotive or manufacturing or some other area?
Yeah, great question. So in 2014, I left my kind of full-time responsibilities to just decide to freelance for a while. And I kind of learned that freelancing is like running your own business, but I didn't realize that. It took several years of trying to work so hard to go from one gig to the next. And, you know, you're working on one contract, you're already thinking about how do I line up the next one and how am I going to pay the rent? And eventually somebody said to me, you know, Jeff, you're actually running a business, whether you like it or not. And I never really saw myself as a business person. So I realized, okay, if I want to not work for somebody else anymore, then I need to take this seriously and figure out how do I actually run a small business. Tried a few different niches, but it was really a conversation with a former student of mine. She was a boot camp student back in the day, a researcher at Harvard, and I had always kept in touch with her, and she kept telling me about the work that she does, and it became more and more fascinating the more that I learned. And in the behavioral sciences in particular, when they run an experiment, they need their volunteers to use an app for 6 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is, so that they can gather some data and see whether some behavior change ideas might be fruitful or not. And in academia, it's very hard for them to find dev shops in industry that would be a good fit. And I thought, well,
Yes.
I've got a foot in both academia and in the industry. Maybe I can help bridge that gap. So it was just a combination of, luck to start to fall into that, to meet somebody who can school me about it. Luck that I'm actually personally interested in that space, and luck that it turns out to be a space that you can start to make money in. So that's, my current experiment is in this area right now.
Wonderful. Your current experiment. And you say luck, but I would also argue that you were prepared. Someone once said, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah.
So you were prepared to teach courses that one of your students, and this was a student at one of the universities where you are an adjunct prof, and one of your students came to you, understood your expertise. She has expertise in behavioral sciences, and you were able to blend your skill sets together and do something great.
Yeah, and it's, I think, tempting for a lot of business owners to try to do everything. Especially when you're first starting out, you feel like, oh, I don't want to miss out on some market that might be, I don't want to tell people that I only do X, because what if somebody with Y comes along and I'm going to miss that?
Yeah.
And so, but that really meant that I was just spinning my wheels trying to do everything and really getting good at nothing.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I had to learn that by specializing in one very super specific niche, I became an expert at that. And so I was able to help people that I wanted to help. And that was really the fun of it. So once I got to the point where I realized I was actually being helpful in a technology way for these researchers, then, I don't need to convince anybody to hire us. I just say, here's what we like to do. And if it's a good fit for you, let's talk. And that just changed my whole notion of what running a business was. I thought it was, I didn't want to do all the salesmanship. I didn't want to do all this marketing. I'm not a self-promoter. I'm not comfortable with that. But once I realized, no, the lens to see this through is, I can help people by doing X, what I'm good at.
Right.
What other people what people intersect with that I can be helpful to? And then just do that.
I love that. That is a classic example of someone who's growing a business based on who they can be helpful to, who can provide a service. We're at ROI Clear, we're big fans of capitalism. We believe that when we're doing business with each other, we're less likely to have conflicts because we're busy trying to help each other. And
that's right.
You are a wonderful example of that. Let's go back a little bit. Tell us about your first days as a software developer, or your decision to become a software developer. Let's go backwards in time, and then we'll move forward to you becoming a business owner. So
we're talking last century here. Okay, so
there we go. Last century. There we go.
So I went to college and ended up with a degree in speech and communications.
Yes.
With which I was qualified to do nothing. So when I graduated, I ended up taking this is 1992. I ended up taking a small programming job at a nonprofit near where I lived, just so I could start to earn some money after college.
Yes.
I figured that eventually they will figure out that I don't have a computer science degree, and at that point I would have to go get a real job. But I had a great boss who was super patient and taught me a lot. My next job ended up with a boss who was super patient and taught me a lot, and just kind of kept going. And it really, this is going to sound funny, but it took 7 or 8 years before I said to myself, okay, I think I'm okay. I guess it's okay that I don't have that degree. I mean, this was a time when, back then, really any job opening for computer programming always said computer science degree required.
Yes.
So I somehow snuck through that system, and just, I never really wanted to become a computer programmer, but it was paying the rent. I kind of enjoyed it. And it led me into so many different industries. For a while, I worked with a healthcare company. Then I was working for retail. Then I was working for, and so it was a way to sort of look at the inside view of a lot of different businesses from the inside. And it wasn't until 2011 that I started getting, started really becoming interested in the learning sciences, because I was curious about how was I learning all this? How do other people learn things?
Right.
Started to teach at some boot camps, then was offered adjunct positions at the University of Chicago and at Northwestern. So it's just been a wild ride. I could never have predicted how it's turned out.
Right. And so by, again, being prepared, taking advantage of opportunities, you said you had a couple of bosses who were, you said, patient and were willing to teach.
Yes.
But you also had to have a learning mentality. You also had to be a sponge.
Yes, I did. And part of that was survival. Like I'm having no background in computer programming, but finding myself in there, I knew my only way to keep that job was to learn as much as possible. But I think more importantly, as the years went on, the developers that I worked with that I admired the most did not have computer science degrees either. They were art majors, they were English majors, they were history majors. And they were bringing that area of their brain to bear on the problems in technology. And I just thought, okay, how did you learn all this stuff?
Right.
And it, I don't, whether it's computer programming or real estate, to be able to learn what you need to know to be effective is key. I don't care what industry you're in. Right. If you haven't sort of learned how to learn, it's going to be all uphill. Every industry changes. Everything is always in a state of flux.
Right. Yeah, you have to do that. Learning how to learn. I like the way you phrased that. So, and in the course of doing that, you also joined forces with someone else you both know, Brian Eng.
Yes.
You and Brian became educators, and you had a firm, if I remember the name of it well enough, you can correct me, Softies on Rails.
Exactly. Well,
or am I jumping ahead too far? Let me know if I'm jumping ahead too far or no.
No, this is great. So 2006, I was working as a lead developer at Crate and Barrel. And we ended up hiring Brian to help out on the team. He started to tell me about a new technology called Ruby. I was like, that sounds stupid. Don't bother me with it. But he kept after me on it, and it changed my career within 12 months. We started then to blog about what we were learning, because we were Microsoft developers at the time. Very few Ruby developers were in the came from the Microsoft space. So we thought, just in case it helps, whoever's Googling for how to solve this problem will do that. Well, we didn't know it was going to take off. So it eventually turned into a book for Pragmatic called Rails for .NET developers. And and it really launched. We did some training. I started doing training around the country. Brian and I did some training in Chicago. At our very first training event, we didn't know what we were doing. We simply rented a small room at a hotel near the airport in Chicago. Just told everybody we know, hey, if you are a developer and you would like to learn more about what Ruby on Rails is all about, as a .NET developer, we've been there. Show up and we'll talk about it. We'll teach you what we know. You were in the front row. Always like,
that's
hey,
where we met.
Let me ask about this. And I was like, who is this annoying person in the front row?
I annoyed the hell out of you. I was one of your first students in the front row, and I annoyed I gladly
it was so good because the truth is that what I learned later, you already knew, which is that exposing your ignorance is not a weakness. It is a strength. If you can say to somebody, hey, you know what? Wait a minute. Can we TiVo that back? What was that again? Like, can you school me on that? That is how learning happens. It's the willingness to be open to something new. I've been conditioned by our school system to not admit when I don't know something, because in our school system, we reward answers.
Yes,
right? The teacher is, who knows the answer to this thing on the board? You get points for that. You get a written test. If you know the answer to that particular question at that particular time you're taking the test, you get points. Yes. We do not value asking interesting questions. We do not value like recognizing problems that are meaningful enough to be solved.
Yeah.
If you want to go all the way back to Einstein, right? He was troubled by what he saw in the Newtonian equations. He was like, okay, but wait a minute.
Yeah.
When you think about light, how does light work with it? It was his questioning that led him to new discoveries. And if you don't have internal questions happening all the time, how are you going to learn that next important thing? So that was how we started to share our knowledge. And I kind of learned that it's always good to give away what you know. I think sometimes in business, we are afraid that if I share too much publicly about what I know, what I've learned, my competitors will see that, or I'll lose some competitive advantage. It's not really true. Like there's more than enough problems to go around. The market is big enough for everybody. And if I freely share what I know and help people for free sometimes, that's great. Then they'll remember me for next time. But either way, I've helped somebody.
Right.
And I think as you know, the capitalism, which I am, of course, a huge fan of, as you are, it sometimes gives us the wrong message that we have to compete in such a way that there's a limited amount of pie for us all to eat.
Yeah.
And it's just not true. Whether it's, any industry you can think of, there's always more there.
Right. Yeah. You know what? And you see that because you have an abundance mentality. You see that this is abundant and there's always more there. I like the way you shared that. I'm grateful that you pointed out my ignorance too.
Hey, anytime I can do that publicly, I will.
I love that. Yeah. But you know what? There it is. That is the only way that we learn, is by being willing to say, hey, I don't know this thing. Can you repeat that? Or I like the way you said it. Can you TiVo that back a little bit so you can explore that, and we wrestle with it. So that's how we do that. So you and Brian Eng came together as instructors. I happened to be a student in that very first class. I didn't realize that was your very first one. I don't know if I would have given you my hard-earned money if I knew you guys were rookies. But
fortunately, we did have some experience by writing. So we had that long history of blogging. And I've found over time that actually writing is one of the ways you can learn.
Yes.
I tend to think just in my head about stuff. But it's really when I'm explaining it to somebody else or I'm writing it down that, I don't know, then it becomes more real and I realize what I don't know.
Yeah,
and it also just helps me think it through. So like this rubber ducky here I've got on my shirt today is because...
Tell us about the rubber ducks. Yes.
Yeah. So in computer science and in software, your software development audience will probably already know about this, but in computer programming, we, when we're stuck with a problem that we're trying to solve, we've found through empirical research that thinking about a problem harder doesn't really help. There's a point where you get stuck where thinking more is just not going to work. And so I encourage my computer science students to, when that happens, find a fellow classmate, but who doesn't know the problem you're working on. Because it forces you to explain as much as you can about the problem, right? So they have enough context. And it's funny how you get halfway through that explanation and something in your brain is happening, and you get halfway through and you're like, oh, wait, actually, never mind. I think I just figured it out, right? I don't know if you've ever had that where, sometimes you start to ask about something and just in the asking, you start to actually figure it out. What's happening is when you get the language center of your brain activated through writing, speaking, it could just be a chat window to a friend. Something about that, gets more of your brain to bear on the problem. And so when that's happening, more connections are made, more memories kick in. And so it's so the thing is, in computer programming, often we don't have somebody handy to talk to.
Right.
And so we all have in our cubicle, we have a little rubber ducky. I don't know if you can see mine. I've got a couple way back there.
Yeah, you've got one back there. And yes. And on your shirt. Yes.
And as ridiculous as it sounds, you have to talk. Okay. You have to talk to the rubber ducky. And so, I sort of look around, make sure no one's looking. And then, because here's the thing, if I don't actually verbalize it out loud, it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
And
so you look around, make sure nobody's looking, or make sure they're talking to a duck of their own.
Exactly. I don't know why the tradition of a rubber duck got started, but if people want to look on Wikipedia, rubber duck debugging, there's a whole article there. You can learn more about it. But it's part of the way that our brain learns, is that by putting language on things, we can start to understand them better.
Right. We're putting, I think on some level in our brains, we hold images in our brains, and language is a way that we describe that image to someone else so that they can see the image we see. And in the process of describing that image, we're clarifying it for ourselves, perhaps.
Exactly. Because you know what it does to me? It slows me down. Like when I'm working on a problem, you're so into it. You've assumed so much. You're already at the forefront of that problem.
Yes.
But you're not really, you take too much for granted and you're stuck. When you have to explain something to somebody else, or a rubber ducky, it forces you to go step by step and really like, it slows your brain down and makes you really look back. It's like, have you ever written an email and then you send it and you're like, oh my gosh, there was a typo. I just saw the typo.
Yeah, right.
Or
yes.
you tweet something out and you're like, oh, even if you proofread it.
Yes.
It's amazing how many times you send stuff and there was still an error in it. Why is that? It's because your brain assumes what it wants to see. When you wrote it, you know what it says, you think you know what it says, and so you miss it. But later, when you slow down and you actually look at it, that's a typo, right?
Yeah.
Well, so for me, being able, if I start to write down, hey, here are the 10 leads I need to get next month. Here's my plan for the next quarter for my business. Or, I need to explain to somebody else what I want to do for the next year.
Right.
It slows me down enough to really think about it clearly.
Yes. It slows me down enough to really think about it clearly.
Yes, because I rush I don't know about you, like, I feel like I'm always in a rush.
Yeah.
I've got too much to do. I've got too many things to catch up on. There are ideas I have I never get to. I'm always in a rush. And the key is to somehow, I don't know if I've got this exactly right, but my understanding is folks like Michael Jordan, who would be in these high pressure, 3 seconds to go, whatever situations, they had this gift to like slow the game down in their mind enough to still execute what they had to do. And I feel like in our area of expertise, we need to learn how to be like super athletes like that.
Sure.
How do we find the right zone to be in a way that it looks like time is moving slowly enough that we can things just become easy?
Yep. There's a lot to be said for that. There are things that we can learn from athletics and apply it to what we do as software developers and as business leaders across the board. And perhaps that is why there are so many former professional athletes who do really well in business, who do really well as business leaders, because they have acquired the discipline and the ability to tune out the noise.
Yes.
Because no matter what you're doing, you got to think about what you're doing. You got to strategize. And you got to ignore those knuckleheads who are yelling at you. Some of those knuckleheads are right inside of you.
Yes, right on. No, I couldn't have said it better. Because I think that athletes, understand practice.
Yes, yes.
And I typically don't. Like, how often do I practice my craft?
Yeah.
Not often enough. And how do I practice correctly in a way that's actually going to bring improvement?
Sure.
I think one of the myths of like the 10,000 hour thing is that, oh, if you just do something for 10,000 hours, you'll be good. So it's not quite true.
Yeah.
You can be just as bad as when you started. So one example is when I've been trying to learn how to play chess. I'm terrible at it.
Okay.
And if I thought, well, I'll just play like for hours and hours and hours and I'll get better. Well, that was not true.
Yeah.
Like you actually have to learn how to analyze what you've done before, decide how to get better, and practice that.
Yes.
And so
it needs to be a feedback loop. Yes, you practice. You need the 10,000 hours, but there must be an iterative feedback loop. Yes.
When a client says, hey, to be honest, this wasn't so great, it can sting. Like it can feel bad. Yeah. But that's our feedback loop.
Right.
As entrepreneurs, like that's the only way that we're going to learn how to move forward.
So moving forward, Softies on Rails education, and we talked a lot about what we need to do to get that 10,000 hours of practice and get good. You started Purple Workshops.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about Purple Workshops? Why purple? I think that's a Seth Godin reference, but go ahead, break it down for our audience, please.
Yeah. So when I was first thinking about how to stop working for other people, I came across a book called Purple Cow.
Yes.
Seth Godin.
Okay.
And it was basically saying that if you are driving through Nebraska and you see some cows, you're like, oh, okay, there's some cows. But if you saw a purple cow, you probably ask somebody the next town, like, what's up with that purple cow?
Right.
So the idea is to find something that you do that someone will remark upon later.
Yes.
So-called remarkable business.
Yes.
And so I just also being a Northwestern alum, always liked the color purple.
Oh,
and so it's just an insight. And the workshops was because my original idea was to provide a place where people could learn lots of different things. So I started with teaching computer programming, but I thought it could be clay classes. It could be a workshop of any kind to help people get better at whatever they would want to do. So I haven't realized that dream yet, but that's sort of where the business name came in from. 4 years ago, just before the pandemic, when I started to zone in on this niche we're talking about for behavioral scientists, Purple Workshops doesn't really mean much to them. So the site that I use is called softwareforresearch.com. And so a lot of people know me through that moniker as well.
Yes. Okay. That's a perfect segue. We're coming towards the end of our time together, and it's going really quick, but you're segueing towards what you're doing right now. What is it that you're doing right now that you are especially proud of that you'd like to share with our audience?
Great question. So in addition to trying to run a fledgling company that's surviving, which is always, rewarding unto itself, I've found myself in a weird spot that I'm grateful for. I teach once a year computer science in the master's program at the University of Chicago.
Yes.
I also teach entrepreneurship at Northwestern University, in the graduate school there. So it is a weird, unintended reflection of my life where I'm taking computer programming and business, and kind of merging them together. And I find that when I'm working with business students at Northwestern who want to get some see and what everybody's talking and like what is all that about? To be able to shed some light for them. And then also to work with the computer science students as they think about their careers and where are they going to work and what do they want to do? to give them some insight on what the industry side is like, is also a lot of fun. So
Right.
I'm just proud that, you know, I'm able to somehow straddle these two universes and bridge that gap a little bit more.
That's got to be very, very fulfilling for you, being able to straddle two universes that you love and bring them together. And I'm sure there's some cross-pollination that your students really benefit from. Your students and your clients as well, I would say. Your students, your clients, your projects, your deliverables, all of that.
And it reminds me that I also have to be always learning. Like,
yes,
you know, as I'm in this space of helping academic researchers with technology, I need to make sure I'm always current and I'm learning about what their domain is so I can help them.
Yes.
And keeping abreast of what my domain is so I can stay current.
Right. Beautiful. Always learning.
Yeah.
Final questions. Can you tell us what is it that you're reading or listening to? You're a perpetual learner. So what is it that you're reading or listening to, podcast, audiobook, what have you, that you would recommend to our audience?
Great question. I'm currently trying to learn about neural networks. So I've got a book about how to do that in Python.
Yes.
And I'm struggling through it. I'm not very good at mathematics. So solve some mathematics to understand that is working. And I feel like it's probably going to be the next level of literacy in computer science. Like,
all right.
So the field of artificial intelligence has been around a long time.
Yep.
And it's been kind of a subset of the computer science field, but more and more it's starting to edge into every other computer science field, programming languages and databases and you know, search, all the classic problems. AI is going to overlap at some point with it. So that's what I'm trying to learn. It's like I have no idea how any of that stuff works, but I can learn it.
Yes.
So that's my current endeavor at the moment.
That is a very positive attitude to have. I have no idea how any of this works, but I can learn it. That is very powerful and positive. And I would even argue that with your speech background and your language background, underlying all of this are languages, right? Language is another way to express what's going on at another layer of abstraction. So I'm looking forward to hearing and reading more about you, Jeff Cohen.
Me too.
Okay. Well, Jeff Cohen, thank you so much for being with us here at ROI Clear. It has been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. Thank you.